You can spend months reading every study in your field, cite every source perfectly, and still get your final paper handed back looking like this. The grammar might be flawless and the facts entirely accurate, but that doesn't matter if the underlying structure is wrong. The most common mistake early researchers make is treating a literature review like a timeline. They summarize what one author wrote in 2010, then what another added in 2015, reading it as a passive history of past events. But a literature review is the active construction of an intellectual scaffolding. You are building the physical framework your study will stand on. If you just compile a flat list of summaries, it collapses when you drop heavy data on it. Getting that structure right, though, means navigating a very specific logical trap before you even type your first search term into a database. Mastering this step means moving away from simply reporting what others have said and taking on the role of a scientific architect. This diagram suggests a linear sequence. Formulate a problem, then design a study. But below, dotted lines reveal a feedback loop. You can't search the literature without knowing your problem, yet you need the review to bring that problem into focus. Researchers break this cycle by starting with a loose, temporary framework. They read broadly around an interest, allowing parameters to shift and crystallize as they learn more, rather than waiting for perfect clarity to begin. They carve out this initial territory using Boolean operators, commands like and, or, and not, to filter millions of academic papers down to a specific manageable cluster. While reading that cluster, the review is actually doing two jobs simultaneously. First, it sharpens the research question. Second, it exposes how others tested similar questions, revealing which methods worked and which ones failed. At the same time, the researcher is building their baseline expertise and creating a map of the existing knowledge, so they know exactly where their future findings will fit. Far from a reading assignment, the literature review acts as an early defense mechanism, preventing you from using flawed methodologies to answer irrelevant questions. To make that defense mechanism work, the organization of the research has to pivot. You must stop grouping papers by the year they were published and start sorting them by the concepts they investigate. This document outlines a theoretical framework. It maps the full landscape of theories on a broad topic, like the relationship between mortality and fertility. A robust framework pulls from economic, religious, medical, and psychological perspectives to show every angle, but you cannot test an entire landscape in a single study. You have to extract a specific piece of it. All of those broad theories are funneled down to isolate one single testable element. This becomes the conceptual framework. That one extracted concept expands to form the exact structural skeleton the researcher will use to gather their own data. Without that strict filtering process, a researcher stays paralyzed by an ocean of competing theories and is unable to produce actionable science. There is one final complication to building this framework, and it has to do with time. The literature review isn't a chore finished in the first month. It's a continuous thread stretching from the initial idea to the final report. As you collect data, you return to the literature, comparing new findings against the established context. Which brings us back to that perfectly cited, heavily revised paper from the beginning. It failed because it lacked thematic organization, it lacked a conceptual framework, and it lacked synthesis. A true literature review maps the known pieces so thoroughly that it reveals a deliberate empty space, identifying exactly what is missing from the conversation. It is only by building that strict structural platform that a researcher earns the right to add their voice to the scientific community.